Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I have been waiting all day.
Let's do it. Scale of 1 to 10. What chance do you give a Notre Dame player other than Joe Alt to be drafted in the first round next year?
I'm gonna go a 5 out of 10 because I think it's like a 50-50 chance. I think that some of the strong contenders are obviously Sam Hartman, but that is contingent on what he does this season. So it's a boomer bust season for him, and he's only going to help his draft stock depending on how he plays in more of a pro style NFL friendly type offense. And then I think another person, we were talking about this a little bit in the pyramid on Tuesday. I think Blake Fisher has the body and the what an NFL tackle should look like, but can he step up and live up to his body frame essentially? Can he play like an NFL offensive lineman because he's got the NFL type body? So for me, those are the two guys that I think have the best chance outside of Joe Alt to go in the first round next year. And I think between the two, I'd put it at like a 5 or 6 out of 10. So right around 50-60% is what I would give it. Kind of a toss up in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's Fisher, I think, is the next logical choice because when you look at the tandem, last year they were considered the best young, sophomore tackle tandem in the nation, and now they're going into their junior seasons. Alt definitely had the bigger rise than Fisher, but like just today, each of them were named Athlon All-Americans, along with Benjamin Morrison, of course. Those are the three who are getting, like Morrison, Alt, Morrison, whichever order that you want to go in. Maybe you put Alt ahead because he's draft eligible this year and Morrison isn't. But it's like those two are the top ones that it seems like are grabbing the national attention right now. And then Fisher right after them. I think Fisher's going to have a really good chance. Right tackles, obviously, typically don't get the love that the left tackles have. But I think that Fisher has a really good chance to play himself into there. The number, I might bump it just a little bit higher because Hartman and Fisher are the two that I'm thinking about. And the thing with Hartman, even though he's sticking around for a 6th year, like because of the fact he is a quarterback, other quarterbacks are going to find themselves in the, like quarterbacks that people aren't talking about right now are going to find themselves in that conversation, a little bit less than a year from now. At this point, because we're what, about a month past the draft now at this point. But I think Sam Hartman has a really good shot of working his way in there. The average is right around 3 first-round quarterbacks drafted per year. So you're going to have Drake May, you're going to have Caleb Williams in whatever order, as we were just talking about. Probably I would put Caleb Williams definitely ahead of Drake May, but I think Hartman has a really good chance to find himself in that conversation next year. And because you've got Fisher and you've got Hartman, I'll bump it up to a little bit better than 50-50 at a 6 that someone other than Alt gets drafted in the first round for the Irish.
It's crazy. I was looking at like just like some early projections for the draft next year, and it's obviously way too early. But would you believe me if I told you this website has 14 quarterbacks ahead of Sam Hartman for best quarterbacks in the draft next year?
Really?
That's 14 quarterbacks. Yeah.
That's
Cameron
amazing.
Ward from Washington State, Jaden Daniels from LSU, Riley Leonard from Duke, JJ McCarthy, Spencer Rattler, Shedeur Sanders, Joe Milton, Bo Nix, Quinn Ewers.
The biggest
guys
question
are proven to me.
Hartman is proven, but the biggest question that he has to answer is, can he play in a different system? Can he play in a pro style, more traditional system than that slow mesh that he's coming out of at Wake Forest? That's the question that he has to answer. If he can produce in Notre Dame's system, I think he's got a really good chance to be, if not a first rounder, at least a second round type guy next year, like Will Levis, like
the guy
who was talking about Will Levis a year ago.
Yeah. It seems that he's the guy that's got the most to prove, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think he has the most potential to gain, you know what I mean? Because of just what you were talking about. Can he show that he's versatile and working in a different style of offense?
Josh wants to know, will Alt leave a year early? When's the last time an O-line player left early from Notre Dame? Well, a lot of those guys, they didn't leave early because they had to continue to improve their stock, to basically become, even like the first round guys to get into that conversation. So they stuck around a year longer. Like Josh Patterson, if he was going to be a first round guy or not Josh Patterson, Jarrett Patterson, if he was going to be a first round guy, he would have left last year. I mean, he stayed, and he still unfortunately wasn't a high round pick. But if Joe Alt at the end of the season is still being talked about as a first round guy, I've got no doubt he's going to leave, especially with the dad who has the background that he has. And because it's Notre Dame, he'll be on pace to get his degree in 3 years. Like, they want them all to get their degrees in 3 years. So he would have his degree in hand potentially. There's no reason he won't leave if he's projected to be a first round pick. There's just way too much money on the line to stick around for another year and risk, injury and or even losing draft stock as opposed to improving it. You can't improve it enough if you're projected to be a first round guy to come back for another year. So Notre Dame and NBC, of course, announced their kickoff times for home games this season. The Navy game in Dublin, which even though, of course, it's in Dublin, is still considered a Notre Dame home game. The Central Michigan game, they're both going to kick off at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. The games against Tennessee State, Pittsburgh, and Wake Forest are going to kick off at 3:30. My question, which kickoff time do you prefer, 2:30 or 3:30?
I'm going to be quite honest with you. I really don't have a whole bunch of preference when it comes to 2:30 or 3:30. And I don't have to be there. I don't have to watch the sunset. I don't have to, see the days get shorter as we get into the fall. Like, I am at home watching TV on Saturday for most games. And I think I would actually prefer the 3:30 game because usually there's a big game on at noon, and then I hit the 3:30 game with Notre Dame. And then at the end of that game, there's usually a primetime 7 or 8 game going on. So I like 3:30 more so for the spacing of all the other games throughout the day. And I think that would be my leading logic on that.
See, but if you get it at 2:30, then
you're not going to convince me.
You've got to jump on the 3:30 games, and then you can watch the Notre Dame game and still watch the tail end of the 3:30 games if you choose to do it that way. Or you're flipping back and forth, like when halftime comes around, you can watch some of the, part of the 3:30 game, go back to Notre Dame.
3:30 also allows me to get more done before 3:30.
Personally, you know me. So what am I going to say?
You're going to say 2:30 because you're a grouchy old guy and you don't like to be at the stadium later than you have to be.
I'm always going to take the earlier games. Now, noon is pushing it. I would not take noon. 1:30.
Oh, no.
I like the days when we still got 1:30 kickoffs personally. Now, that was back when we weren't on daylight saving, when Notre Dame or when Indiana didn't change the clocks. That's when we still got the 1:30 kickoffs. I think they all went to 2:30 basically when we started, moved over to Eastern time permanently and started changing our clocks and all that kind of stuff. The earlier, the better. So I will always take the 2:30 games. I am not vehemently opposed to the 3:30 games. I mean, that's typically the afternoon window when most of the other games are kicking off anyway, is at 3:30. So I'm not diabolically opposed to it. I know some people I've seen say they like the 3:30 because it gives them an extra hour of tailgating, which, there's nothing wrong with that either, but I'll take 2:30, especially since they still don't sell any beverages inside the stadium. Now, again, that's not for me. I'm talking about for the tailgaters and stuff like that. Fill in the blank. It is blank that BYU, Nebraska, and Colorado are among FBS teams that are holding transfer portal camps where uncommitted players in the transfer portal can show up for a tryout.
It's a brilliant idea by BYU, Nebraska, and Colorado. They must have been listening to this show and hearing us talk about how there should be some sort of transfer portal all-star game. They just turned it into a camp and said, hey, you're still in the portal. You want a shot to play here. We're looking to add, especially Colorado, as many players as possible. I think it's a great idea. It's just like it's the same concept as, walk-ons that they have at the beginning of the year. They hold a camp at whatever, school you're at, like Penn State when Eli Manning showed up that one time. But yeah, I just think it's just a spinoff of, a walk-on tryout essentially. But I think the players are better, potentially. And yeah, I just think it's a really good idea. And I think you're going to see a lot more teams probably doing it going forward. I think these are the guys who are going to be ahead of the pack and kind of be the trailblazers of, what to do with the transfer portal.
The NCAA has released numbers. Almost 40% of guys who enter the transfer portal over the last 2 years that they've had this did not end up at a new school. Almost 40%. So, like, that's pushing half the guy, just a little bit less than half the guys who enter the portal don't end up at a new school. And, they've got to pay to go to these camps, just like when guys were in high school and you pay to go to these different camps and you show up, trying to get recruited and signed for the first time. This is exactly the reason they need some kind of collaborative showcase like what we were talking about. You put together like one weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever. You put together some kind of weekend showcase like a combine, just like the NFL does. You bring all these guys in to a centralized location. And then if you've got enough guys at each position, you put together some kind of game and you have them play, and you've got these coaches out there watching them. Why make them go to all these multiple camps all over the country? If there are this many guys, if nearly 40% are still unsigned at this point, and probably right now it's even more than 40%, I bet it's closer to half, put together a centralized combine and do it that way rather than make them go to, camp after camp across the country trying to get somebody to sign them. It's the perfect excuse to do something like that.
I agree.
And just heck, the NCAA is in Indianapolis. It's their system. That they've set up this system. Do it just like the NFL. Just run it out of Lucas Oil. It's in the middle of the country. Do it down there. You can do a pro combine there. Do a college combine down there as well. I don't see why not. We kind of touched on this when we were talking to RJ a little bit ago. Penn State, Michigan State. They're going to play a primetime game on NBC on Black Friday at Ford Field in Detroit. So playing that game on that Friday at Ford Field also means that Michigan's state football championship games are going to have to be pushed back a day. They're going to have to play them Saturday, Sunday that weekend rather than Friday, Saturday. Do you buy or sell the move?
I'm pretty indifferent on the move. I think overall, we're talking about now there's an NFL game on Black Friday. There is going to be a college game now in the evening time on Black Friday. Like, yeah, I enjoy the fact that I'll have football to watch on Black Friday. It's just another day of the week where I can, chill out and watch football around the holidays. But like the game itself, Michigan State and Penn State, that doesn't like move the needle for me. A Big Ten game between Penn State and Michigan State, like, might it be a halfway decent game? Sure, but it's not like one where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm absolutely jacked up. I need to watch this. It's not like Alabama and Auburn, or like Alabama and Tennessee, or maybe like USC and Oregon, or, Clemson, North Carolina. It's not one of those games for me. So I'm indifferent on it, but I'm glad that I have something to watch on Black Friday while I'm kind of just chilling out and recovering from Thanksgiving.
Yes, recovering from all that eating on Thanksgiving. I mean, it's always nice to have a little football program going on, so like we're going to have Jets Dolphins at 3 p.m. for the NFL. And then just a little bit after that ends, you're going to have Michigan State, Penn State. I won't mind having it on. The reason they're moving this to Ford Field is the stuff that, again, we were talking about with RJ and what we were talking about earlier this week. All these northern Big Ten schools are whining because, it's cold in November in the Midwest and they don't want to play these night outdoor games. Newsflash, what happens if you make the college football playoff? Are you going to move it inside to a dome? Like we've talked about this before. Are you going to move it into a dome, or are you going to play it on your own campus where you've got a home field weather advantage? Like if you've got, one of these Southern schools coming up, or a Southern California school, or whatever it happens to be. Be big boys and get outside. High school kids are playing outside. Now a lot of them, are playing in these domes. I think it stinks that they're pushing these high school games back. They were already scheduled. Obviously nobody knows exactly who's going to be playing them in them at this point because they've got to earn their way there. But hopefully this is just a one-off deal, and the Penn States, Michigan States, Ohio State, Michigans of the world can figure this out and pull on their big boy pants and go, it's okay if we play a night game outdoors in November. We know that Notre Dame has done it plenty of times before, so I don't know why there's such an aversion of the Big Ten to get outside in November and play a football game.
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising to me as well. It's like the majority of the Big Ten resides in the Midwest, and it's always cold in the Midwest in November and December. So like you have to be used to it at this point, right? So I'm on the same page. It seems like there's this rush to all of a sudden kind of get indoors. So I think it's like the Big Ten's like, all right, well we got to play in prime time. We'll move one of these games inside and put it on a day where there's not a lot of other football. So it's like a win-win for them almost.
Yeah. From a programming standpoint, it's great. I saw some Michigan State fans going, good, we don't have to go to a half-empty stadium in East Lansing. We'll go to Ford Field. The question is how many people will actually show up at Ford Field for that game. But, I don't know. So I like the programming. The fact that it's at Ford Field, take it or leave it. Fill in the blank. The most overhyped college football team this offseason is blank.
The most overhyped team this offseason is blank. I'm going to go one school from the ACC and one school from the SEC.
Okay, you're going to give us two.
I think Tennessee is mildly overrated, considering that they haven't been very proven over the past, 10, 15 years, but they had a really good year last year.
Hold off on your ACC team. Finish your thought on I'll give my ACC team. We'll see if it's the same. But you can continue with Tennessee. Go ahead.
Yeah, so then Tennessee, I just there's not a proven track record there. And I don't know if that for what they play in and what we've seen of them, I just think that it was a one-off. Like, I hope they can get back to it. Like, I remember, what was that, like mid-2000s, I want to say, maybe even early 2000s when Notre Dame would play Tennessee. And it like Tennessee was good at that time. Like that, I think that's kind of when we saw their decline was right after
back in the Phil Fulmer days.
Yep. Yeah, and I just not that I'm like a huge Tennessee fan, but I'm not rooting against them, and I'm not like overly actively like, oh, I want Tennessee to be good. But I think it's good for college football in the SEC when Tennessee is better. But I just think they're a little bit overhyped going into this season.
I agree. I want to see them put together back-to-back seasons. They're going to have a new quarterback this year. The one that I'm going with is the one that our friend Roger Dodger is voting for.
That was my ACC one.
And I had a feeling that's who it would be. And Florida State, it just feels like Texas. Like every year we're told Texas is back, but they're never really back. And I realize that Florida State's coming off a double-digit win season. They were 10-3. They won the Cheez-It Bowl. Okay, best record since 2016, but they play LSU again. They play Clemson again. That's in the first month in the season. They're going to play Miami and Florida. They lost to NC State last year, and they play them again this year too. And NC State's got Brennan Armstrong, so people are expecting them to be pretty good this year. Jordan Travis has gotten incrementally better each year, but he's still a career 61% passer. So I just have a hard time completely buying into, all of a sudden this Florida State team, okay, now they're top 10. They're going to challenge for a college football playoff spot. I just think there's a lot for them still to prove. It's one thing to do it for 1 year, just like you were saying with Tennessee. It's another thing to do it in back-to-back years.
I would agree.
Yeah. And, LSU getting a lot of hype. Do they deserve it? The BK breakdancing. You had me until BK breakdancing.
I actually think they're going to be a little bit better this year, to be honest.
They could be because their schedule is not that challenging, like that.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to they have a quarterback with more experience. They have a second-year head coach, so obviously he's turning over, his regime, his roster, his overall how he runs a program, etc. I wouldn't be surprised if LSU is about the same or a little bit better next season.
Yep, salty. Texas is back. back to playing below expectations, and we'll see. How about another team from Texas? TCU was 13-2 last year. Their Vegas over under is 7.5 wins this season. So here's their schedule. We're going to predict the TCU schedule. They start with Colorado, a team that a lot of people have been talking about with too much hype right now. But, I guess Deion Sanders will do that. So TCU starts with Colorado. Then they've got Nichols. They go to Houston, then SMU and West Virginia at home, at Iowa State, followed by BYU, at Kansas State, at Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor, at Oklahoma. And now you notice Houston and what was the other one? BYU. Those are two of the new teams in the Big 12. The Big 12, they're not going to play everybody this year because they've added the 4 new schools. So there you see TCU's schedule this season, over under 7.5 wins for the Horned Frogs.
Oh man, this is a tough one because it's like I feel like every year the Big 12 is inconsistent. Like you never can go into it and say these couple teams are going to be pretty solid the entire year. I feel like there's maybe one team that consistently is pretty good and the rest is kind of a toss up. I guess we'll start with the first 3. I seen them winning against Colorado, Nichols. I think they're going to lose to Houston. I think I'm going to throw that out there right now.
Wouldn't be surprised.
And that first chunk. So that puts them at 2 wins.
Okay.
I think they beat SMU, and then they split between West Virginia and Iowa State. Yeah. And so I think at this point we're at 4-2. 4. And then I think they win against BYU. They lose against Kansas State. And then they beat Texas Tech, so we're at 6-3.
Agreed.
And then towards the end, those last 3 games, I think
Texas, Baylor, at Oklahoma.
I think that they lose to Oklahoma.
I think they lose 2 of those games.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where I'm at. I think that they lose 2 of those 3 games and probably beat Baylor and lose to Texas and Oklahoma. So what? That puts me at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7-5. Like it's right there. I said it before. They're not going to be as good as they were last year. I think that Colorado game to start the season is going to be close. They were trending to be a not great team last year and just kind of hit, the one of those times where you just hit the strike of lightning, luck of the whatever it might be. They changed their trajectory, and I just don't see them doing that 2 seasons in a row. So I'm going to go under on the 7.5, and I think it's right at 7-5.
Yeah, I completely agree with your whole line of thinking there. I'm right there as well because it's year 2 for Sonny Dykes, and they were flirting with disaster a few times. Like if Daniels doesn't
the
get
amount
hurt,
of games that they won and towards the end, 1 possession, late comeback games, like you can't do that every year, and they don't have Max Duggan anymore.
That's exactly right. 5 of their wins last year were single-digit wins. The Baylor win was a 1 point last year, I believe it was. Texas was close. And, you look at even Oklahoma. TCU had lost 8 straight to the Sooners. Oklahoma was down for most of the year before they rebounded late in the season. They ended up getting to the bowl, played Florida State actually in that Cheez-It Bowl. But they had lost 11 of 12 to Oklahoma. And I can't see them putting together anywhere close to what they put together. I was surprised that the over-under is actually as low as it is at 7.5. But again, when you go through that schedule and you look at what things are going to look like, and not only did they lose Duggan, they lost Quentin Johnson. They lost LaDainian Tomlinson's son, Travius Hodges Tomlinson, who was an All-American corner last year. So there's a lot of talent from that college football playoff team that they lose. And so, I completely agree. I see them sitting right there at 7 wins as well. I'm surprised. We've done a few of the different predict the records this week. I'm surprised how many unders that I've had already this season. I don't know if I'm just being pessimistic or what, but
I have a bonus question for you.
Okay, hit me.
Scale of 1 to 10. How surprised were you that Notre Dame baseball lost to the worst team in the ACC tournament with their season on the line?
And I'm glad you brought it up because I meant to include a baseball question and then I forgot, and then you were busy, so I didn't want to add it. I was shocked. Aiden Terrell just didn't look good.
He got all conference too.
I know. He gave up a leadoff home run, ended up giving up 3 bombs in 4 innings to Pittsburgh, and Pitt is the number 12 seed, and it really stews Notre Dame. They have no path out of pool play now. They play Wake
because
Forest.
the tie record, the automatic seed ahead of you advances, and Wake Forest is, even they beat Wake Forest, Wake Forest is the number 1 overall. So a tie record, Wake Forest is moving on.
Exactly.
I guess I was just I was honestly shocked because, you know, going into that last week, they needed to win a lot of games. They lose to Northwestern. They lose 2 of 3 to Boston College, and it's like, okay, well, we can maybe reset here. We're in the ACC tournament. All we need to do is I was texting you. It's a blessing in disguise getting Wake Forest, because in this new format, it's pool play. Well, if you get the number 1 seed, then you're getting the worst seed in the whole tournament. So the idea or the thought process has to be, okay, yes, we got Wake Forest, but we should at least be able to beat Pittsburgh and then have our chances and roll the dice against Wake Forest. I just can't believe that they didn't handle business against Pittsburgh like that. I think it's, especially, you know, with everyone knew what the stakes were, right? You can't.
You had to win that game.
Can't win that or lose that game against Pittsburgh.
I give them an outside chance. Like, if they can beat Wake Forest, they're going to have to wait and hope there aren't a lot of bid stealers this weekend. You know, the conference tournaments are going on right now, and the selection show is going to be Monday, Memorial Day. But they absolutely have to beat Wake Forest Friday night now at this point. They've got to beat Wake Forest, because that would at least give them one quality win coming out of this thing. Again, they're not going to advance out of pool play, but if they beat Wake Forest, it's a win over the number 1 team in the country, and it gives them a shot. But at this point, they've lost 4 out of 5, and you've lost to, you know, Northwestern and Pittsburgh, who both have RPIs in the 70s.
Lost to Michigan State twice.
Yeah, it's just not looking good right now. It reminds me a little bit of Dave Schrag's 2008 team. They were sitting with a couple weeks to go in the regular season. They were in position to host a regional that year, and then all of a sudden, they just couldn't win a game. They just, against anybody, they just started losing the last couple of weeks of the season. Things spun out of control, and not only did they not host, they didn't make the tournament at all. And, you know, again, Notre Dame's lost 4 out of 5, and 2 of those losses are to not good teams. So
I guess that's what's just so shocking is, like, did they put too much pressure on themselves? You know, were they thinking about winning at all costs rather than just going out and playing how they're supposed to?
Yeah, because then even Radek Burkholz came in, and he's been a quality arm for them here down the stretch, and he gave up a couple home runs to Pittsburgh yesterday as well. So it
seems like Pittsburgh was the one actually playing for their lives, except, you know, Notre Dame wasn't.
Yep, exactly. So they'll finish off the ACC tournament 7:00 tomorrow night in Durham, and then, you know, again, if they beat Wake Forest, I at least give them a shot at getting a bid, because but they were going into yesterday, according to some of the projections, among the last 4 in. Like, they had fallen to last 4 in, but losing to Pittsburgh probably puts them into that, you know, at the top of the first 4 out.
Oh, wow. So you're saying they were the first 4 in before losing to Pittsburgh.
Right.
Oh, I wish you wouldn't have told me that. It makes it hurt even more.
Yep. Exactly. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. We appreciate you as always. And if you were here from the beginning, appreciate you working through some of the technical stuff we had with RJ. But once we got going, RJ had some good information on USC, of course, and always good with Jesse. Jesse and I will be back at 5:00 tomorrow for the Rapid Fire Friday show. So we'll talk to you then. Smash that like button on your way out. Roger Dodger, we appreciate you for stopping in today, even with that Trojan icon.
That's rivalry love from Roger Dodger. Right. He didn't have to say that.
Appreciate it. Hit the like button and, of course, subscribe. Oh, you know what? I forgot one question that we had from Chi-Town. Which Steyrs would win a game of horse? This is not even close. Jesse would smoke me, I think. He's the Cleveland YMCA baller. So I've got no
something
chance.
Like that. We played a 10:00 game last night. I think that's why I'm so cranky today. We were on a West Coast trip playing at 10:00 last night at the YMCA, and we can't guard the perimeter 3. So if anyone's got some defensive schemes to how to guard perimeter 3s, please let me know.
You might have to get Tommy over there. See if Tommy can get the legs out and get it going. Horseshoes. We haven't played horseshoes around here in a long time. We might, with that mound we've got in the backyard, maybe we need to set up some horseshoes back there. That'd be a good thing
utilizing
to do.
it.
That's right. All right. We will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. IB Nation Sports Talk.